Today on Prophecy Unfolding, we will examine the rising internal protests in Iran against the Islamic leadership and the prophetic nexus. Well, I'm Dr. Richard Schmidt, founder of Prophecy Focus Ministries and pastor at Union Grove Baptist Church in Union Grove, Wisconsin. And we're going to be looking at Ezekiel chapter 38 in just a moment and a few other things. But before we do, I want to invite you, of course, to Union Grove Baptist Church, where I have the privilege of pastoring. It's right in the heart of Racine County, which is about 30 minutes south of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right in the heart of Racine County, a little bit north of Kenosha. And, of course, we have folks coming from all over the areas here to our church. And Union Grove Baptist Church, our service starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow for those listening on Saturday. So 9 a.m. right at Union Grove Baptist Church is our service time. Then we go about an hour and 15 minutes. Then we have about a half an hour fellowship time, good treats and all sorts of things. And then at 10:45 to 11:30, we have our Sunday school time for all ages, multiple adult classes, classes for all, of course, children, nursery, and so forth. So we invite you to come. Then on Wednesday night at 6:30, we have our children's programs as well as the Rooted Teens Teen Group. And then we have Bible studies that I do. One, we do what's called Prophecy Focus Global Update for about 30 minutes, and about 6:30 to 7, and 7 o'clock then we're going through the book of Daniel. So we invite you to come, give us a check if you're within driving distance, and we would love to have you. All right, well, let's take a look a little bit at what's taking place in the Middle East. And as most of you are very aware, Iran is a major player when it comes to the Islamic world. The Ayatollah Khomeini has been a major powerhouse, and he, of course, resides in the area of Iraq. It's been said that Iran basically controls what all the other Islamic countries are doing, at least the leadership has a tremendous power in that particular area of the world, which, again, is Iran. So some of the things that you might remember recently in the news, and then we're going to go into what's taking place as we speak. Iran, of course, was the place where the nuclear powerhouses were being built. America last year, 2025, President Trump went in, bombed several of those nuclear facilities, rendering them useless, at least at that time. And basically, I mean, it was a major strategic move, very, if you will, to many of us that thought Iran was much more powerful than it was and is a little bit concerned about that. It's like, wow, if we go into Iran and we bomb their facilities, what in the world are they going to do to us? So there's been this long-term fear, if you will, of what Iran could do to Israel or what Iran could do to the United States. And, I mean, truly, folks, it's an amazing, amazing thing. Israel ran some missions into Iran as well. And then America came in and, I mean, we dropped the big bombs on the nuclear facilities and came out unscathed. That, to me, is just marvelous. It's wonderful, and quite frankly, went in the face of the concept that Iran was this major powerhouse and basically could destroy America with nuclear weapons or whatever, and literally nothing took place. Now, it's not to say something couldn't happen in the future where Iran rebuilds and becomes a powerhouse. The one thing which I always hesitate to say, but it's true and it needs to be said, is that Iran definitely is spoken about in the prophetic word, and we're going to see that in a little bit when we go to Ezekiel 38. But one country is not spoken about in Bible prophecy, and that's the United States of America. We're not there. We're never, ever mentioned in Bible prophecy. And, of course, that makes us wonder sometimes, well, why is that? Is it because of, and you can fill in the blank, are we going to exist when the tribulation time comes, when we get into the end time scenario or not? Well, that remains to be seen. And, of course, we don't know the answer because the Bible doesn't talk about the United States in the Scriptures. Now, there are those that allegorize and spiritualize various texts within the Bible and say, well, we think that X means the United States, or maybe Babylon is the United States, or maybe when it talks about an eagle, it's talking about the United States. Folks, that's all speculation. It's allegorizing and spiritualizing text. The only place in the Bible that potentially could refer to the United States of America is actually found in Zechariah chapter 14. And I'm going to read that, and then you can figure out what we're talking about. And, of course, I'll explain it in just a minute. Zechariah 14 talks about the Battle of Armageddon and when Jesus Christ is returning to this earth. And the Battle of Armageddon, actually, probably better stated, the campaign of Armageddon. It's not just simply a one-day event, but here's what it says, Revelation 14, verse 1. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. There it is. I will gather, God says, all nations to battle against Jerusalem. If the United States still exists when Jesus Christ returns to this earth to set up his kingdom, spoken about in Revelation 19:11 through Revelation chapter 20, verse 7, if America still exists, they will have their troops that will be sent to Jerusalem to battle against them. That's what the Bible says. I will gather all the nations. Every single nation will get fired up at Israel. They'll be coming towards Jerusalem. And, of course, that's when Christ will return and wipe out all of those troops at the Battle of Armageddon. So there is no guarantee that America will exist at this time. So what we're looking at now is what's taking place in Iran and what does it have to do with the prophetic nexus. All right, so President Donald Trump has found a new source of leverage against Iran's Islamic regime, the Iranian people themselves. Now, this comes from the Washington Stand, an article written by Joshua Arnold on January 5th. The Iranian people themselves protests that began 9 days ago, in other words, right at the end of December and have gone into January. Protests that began 9 days ago have now spread to 26 of Iran's 31 provinces as economic unrest catalyzed widespread dissatisfaction with the regime to the brink of open revolt. As it is habit, the repressive regime is now turning its weapons upon its own subjects, earning a stern warning from President Trump. If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to the protesters' rescue, the president said on social media. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Folks, that is an amazing statement made by President Trump, basically saying, listen, we are going to defend the protesters, those that are basically going against the Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic imams, and those that are running that country. To me, that is absolutely amazing because what happens in the past? Well, every time protesters rise up in Islamic-type cities, those protesters are taken out. They're either arrested, they're killed, they're executed, whatever it takes place to keep the regime in power. And now the president has made this statement, listen, if the Iranian government goes after the citizens based on their protests, we're coming over there to help them. Folks, that is an amazing, amazing statement. The reason we're going to go to Ezekiel in a few minutes is because that is indicating that if indeed things keep going in this same direction, that Iran and the Islamic world is going to be neutralized, at least at the present time. Now, that is an extremely interesting piece of the prophetic scenario because Ezekiel chapter 38 makes it very clear that before the Islamic world or the alignment of the anti-Israeli nations take place, that there will be a time when Israel will believe that it is at peace. So let's go to that passage, because is what President Trump is basically threatening to do to the Iranians, is this part of the scenario that basically will render Iran impotent and the Islamic world, at least for a period of time, whereby Israel will feel safe, which must happen before the invasion at the Gog-Magog battle. Well, let's go to Ezekiel chapter 38 and start to examine it. So the Bible says, "Now the word of the Lord came to me," or Ezekiel, saying, "Son of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him." All right, so we're talking about Meshech, Tubal, and we'll see Gomer, Togarmah in a little bit. We're talking about Turkey. All right, so let's move on. Verse 4, "I will turn you around, put hooks into your jaws, and lead you out with all your army horses and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords." Then he names some of the other countries that'll be involved: Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya. Now, of course, Persia includes Iran and so forth. So Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah, again, Gomer and Togarmah being from Turkey, from the far north, and all its troops, many people are with you. And of course, we talked about Rosh a little bit earlier, which is where the Russian coalition. So we're looking at Russia as well as the countries now that make up Persia and Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer and all its troops in Togarmah. So we're looking at all of the nations surrounding Israel that are one day going to come up against it. And God says, listen, I'm going to put something into those countries' leaders. I'm going to put a hook in their mouth and draw them to come after the Jewish people. Verse 7, Ezekiel 38, "Prepare yourself." In other words, he's talking to these anti-Israeli nations, "and be ready, you and all your companies that are gathered about you, and be a guard for them. And after many days, verse 8, you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate." In other words, God's saying the Jewish people, they'll be returned to the land, and we're seeing that happen as we speak. 7.5 million of the 15 million Jewish people have already made Aliyah or have gone to Israel, and God is bringing all the Jewish people back there. They were brought out of the nation, speaking of the Jews, and now all of them dwell safely. Whoa, wait a second. Israel has been under attack constantly. They've been fighting the nations. They've been fighting the Islamic nations. They've been in war with Hezbollah recently, and Hamas, and Houthis, and of course the Iranian regime. And God is saying he's going to bring them all back, and they will dwell what? Safely. That's verse 8 of Ezekiel 38. And now he said, listen, when they're dwelling safely, here's what will take place. You, speaking of these Islamic nations, will ascend, coming like a storm, covering the land like a cloud, you and all your troops and many peoples with you. Thus says the Lord God, on that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, and you will make an evil plan. You will say, now catch this, this is the key operative statement now. You, those Islamic nations, the coalition of anti-Israeli nations, you will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take plunder and to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against a people gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land. Listen, folks, this is an amazing prophecy that God set forth in the book of Ezekiel. Now, how does that tie into what we're talking about with the protests that are taking place in Iran over the first weeks of January and so forth? And what is the president doing, our president, President Trump, doing to set the stage potentially for what's happening in Ezekiel 38 and the first 12 verses? Well, the Bible makes it clear that Iran must stand down. The Islamic world must stand down for a bit to where Israel feels safe. Before that massive invasion comes by the Islamic world against Israel, they referring to the Islamic world, are going to have to back off to a place where Israel literally feels that they are dwelling safely. They're in a safe land. They're in a safe position. Folks, that has not happened. We definitely aren't there right now. But the stage is being set. Is indeed President Trump over the next 3 years going to be the one, at least part of the equation, that gets the Middle East settled down to where Israel actually feels safe? Folks, we don't know the answer to that yet. That's still part of the prophetic scenario. It's going to happen. Now, is it going to happen under President Trump's watch, or is it going to happen in the future? We do not know the answer to that question. But one thing remains clear, one thing remains sure, that it is going to happen and potentially happen within this generation. Let's look at some of the things that are happening in Iran right now that are setting the stage, if you will, for the massive protests that are taking place in Iran against the Islamic leadership. By the way, just as a side note, I can't prove that it's true, but the media is reporting that the Ayatollah Khomeini plans, if things get really bad, to take off and go to Russia and basically be protected there and bring a massive amount of resources with him, money, to basically allow his lifestyle to remain at a high level. We'll see if that plays out or not. But here's some of the things that the people in Iran, of all places, are protesting. The protest began with the shopkeepers and bazaar merchants closing their doors in response to dire economic conditions. Since Iran's war with Israel, its rial, R-I-A-L, currency has lost 60% of its value, dropping at one point to a record low of 1.445 million to the dollar. 1.445 million rials, or reals, R-I-A-L, which is the Islamic currency, equals $1 American dollar. Folks, that's crazy. Iran's annual inflation rate reached 42.2% in December. Folks, do you remember back a few years ago when all of a sudden the economy was going extremely bad in America? All of a sudden food prices were rising, some as high as 10 to 15%. Gas prices were rising. We were up sometimes around $5, $6 a gallon of gas in certain places. And Americans, of course, were very upset with that. Well, that was nowhere near the 42.2% inflation rate that happened in December in Iran. Food prices were up 72%. In other words, folks, if you went to the store and your groceries, you went through and filled your cart up with whatever, you were going to pay almost double what you paid in the past. Folks, that's a horrible thing. The economic thrust against the people is horrible. Obviously, just being able to eat and survive is becoming a very, very challenging situation for the Iranian people. Meanwhile, Iran's central bank registered a decline in gross GDP of 0.6% for the 6 months beginning in late March 2025. Residents of the oil-rich country have also suffered power outages and now face rising fuel prices. Also, the country is neglected to procure a stable water supply for the capital metropolis. Now, folks, when you begin to think about these things and what's taking place, These are dire circumstances. People are going to rebel. They're going to protest. They're going to do everything possible to get the regime to, if you will, get their economy back in shape so that they can survive. These are terrible things that are taking place. And, of course, the reason President Trump got involved in this, it's like, okay, we understand the economy's bad, not much I can do about that, and so forth. But when he made this statement, listen, if the government of Iran comes out and begins to butcher and slaughter its own citizens, President Trump said, I'm your guy. We're going to bring in our troops. We're going to come in there, and we're going to basically give them protection. In other words, go against the military and police powers in Iran. Folks, that is an amazing statement that he made. Well, what's going to happen? Well, we don't know at this point how this is going to play out. But one thing we know, if indeed this is setting the stage, which it is, for the prophetic scenario to be fulfilled, Iran and all of its proxies are going to have to stand down in order for Israel, as Ezekiel 38 verse 8 says, to dwell safely. Again, what does Ezekiel 38 verse 11 say? You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates to take plunder. In other words, the Iranian nations, if you will, the proxies, all of the Islamic world, one day is going to be looking at Israel. Israel is going to believe they're in a state of safety, a state where they can be in quote-unquote unwalled villages. In other words, there's no protective walls around. There's no bars. There's no gates. The windows are, if you will, left unprotected. Have you ever gone into some places, maybe in urban areas, and you'll see store windows and doors, and they'll have gates that are in front of them or iron bars to try and protect the property. And God is basically saying, Israel will get to a place where they won't need any of that type of protective gear because they believe they are at peace. So, folks, as we see these things happening, many folks have especially when the war began in October 7th, after the October 7th, 2023 massacre of the Jewish people, there were those that says, well, is this the Gog-Magog battle? Nope, absolutely not. The Gog-Magog battle, they will come about in the future after the rapture of the church-age saints takes place. That battle will eventually take place, but Israel must first be in a state of peace. So what is interesting then is the stage is being set for that very thing to take place. Let me go back to a little bit of this article. At first, the Iranian mullahs attempted to placate the protesters' concerns, acknowledging the pressure on people's livelihoods and promising reform. Mohammad Reza Farzin, Iran's chief central banker, resigned several weeks ago as the fall guy for the ongoing inflation. But the protests kept spreading, and the popular hatred for their government began to cross the line into open rebellion. In one attack, demonstrators breached a police station affiliated with Iran's Republican Guard Corps, the IRGC, burned several police cars. In another, they threw stones at police officers and regime-aligned militia members, resulting in one death and a dozen injuries among the government-aligned forces. So these things have been taking place. Let me just read a little bit more to give us a little bit more information about the total unrest in Iran. Soon the Iranian regime had revealed to its more typical tactics of suppressing dissent through brutal force. Now, this is where President Trump has been watching. Across protests at 22 locations in 78 cities, the Iranian regime has allegedly killed at least 20 demonstrators and arrested 990, according to data compiled by the United States-based human rights activists in Iran. But the crackdown predated the protests. Since its catastrophic war with Israel in the summer of 2025, The Iranian regime says it has arrested 21,000 suspects, and international watchdogs have documented between 1,500 and 2,000 executions. Did you catch that? Since October 7th, since the horrible war took place, there have been just in 2025, there's been somewhere upwards near of 2,000 people being executed by the government, basically as those that were traitors or those that allowed the United States to get intelligence or Israel to get intelligence. So again, President Trump has come out and said, nope, not on my watch. If this is going to continue, if the Iranian government is going to continue to butcher and kill protesters, then he is considering coming in, and heaven knows what that means, but coming in and somehow bringing some stability to Iran and its people. All right, so let's close this out then with summarizing what's taking place. Again, Iran is a major player in the Ezekiel 38, 37, and 38 Gog-Magog War, 37 where the Jews returned, 38 and 39 the Gog-Magog War. Iran being one of the key players in the alignment of anti-Israeli nations. Ezekiel 38, verse 8 and 11 and 12 make it clear that Israel must be in a state of peace when the Gog-Magog War breaks out. Now remember, folks, when the alignment of anti-Israeli nation comes to pass, they will attack Israel, but Israel will be preserved by God. He makes it very clear that he will wipe out all of those nations. Folks, I believe that will set the stage for Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 to come to pass. The Islamic world will be neutralized, and the Islamic mosque and Dome of the Rock, the shrine, will come down. The third Jewish temple will be allowed to be built by the Antichrist, and then that temple will remain for 7 years, 3.5 years in peace and 3.5 years of horrible persecution for the Jews. So, folks, there's so much here. There's so much prophecy that the stage is being set. Things are beginning to happen. And, folks, we are seeing some of it take place in this generation. Well, I want to thank you once again for listening to us right here on Prophecy Unfolding. Once again, we invite you to come to Union Grove Baptist Church tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the heart of Union Grove. God bless you, and thanks for listening.